Hi. All right. Good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And then we can go ahead and get on to the main event. If you want to hand the microphone off to Jessica.
Great. Thanks, John.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay. So as everybody knows, today we are going to review the top 3 RFP bidders and provide a staff recommendation as per the guidance of Caitlin, who is on the screen as well. And Caitlin is going to introduce herself when she starts the slide deck and provide part of the presentation, which will all be an executive session due to the nature of our non-disclosure agreements with the bidders. So Dan will go through a little bit of background on this in the public session, and then we will break for executive session in order to go through the details. So one thing that I do want to show people when we get to the executive session, or just alert you to, is that we did keep the names of the bidders private just at the beginning of the presentation. We are going to tell you who they are, obviously, but in the beginning, we wanted everyone to focus on the data and the facts and not get stuck on the names. Some of you know the bidders, some of you don't know the bidders. There could be some preconceived notions already put forward, or maybe none. But typically what you do, and what I did in my last 2 companies, we did the same process with our boards, and it worked effectively. So we're going to name them supplier 1, supplier 2, and supplier 3. And then when we run through the presentation, at the end, we'll go ahead and show you who they all are and have a hopefully robust discussion around this. So Dan, I think you're going to have to make the call about running through the presentation in its entirety, which I think we probably should. That worked pretty well at the FAC. So that, because oftentimes what will happen is we'll answer questions, hopefully during the course of the presentation. So we'll probably ask folks to jot down their questions as we go through it, and then we'll go back and hit everyone's questions and hope that folks do have a lot of questions, because this is a very important issue. And we're pretty excited about it because there's a lot of work and effort that was put into this. So without further ado, Dan, do you want to share your screen and start the slide? So Dan, that's showing if you just like I was having problems, there you go. Now you got it. And you're still on mute.
All right. So I can't see any of your wonderful faces now when I have it in this mode. So let me try one other thing here real quick. I can get to it. Nope, we're going to go with this. So good morning, everybody. Sorry, I can't see your wonderful faces. So Jessica, if you could please let me know if there's any questions that pop up. I guess we're holding the questions till the end, so we'll just run through this, and I'll cover the introductory part here, and then, like Jessica mentioned, we'll hand it over to Caitlin to go through the actual evaluation of the RFPs and executive session. So we'll get started here. First off, we'd like to cover our agenda for today, and we're going to be reviewing some background information, how we got to where we are. I know a lot of you guys are very familiar with this. We've been going through this for a long time, but it doesn't hurt to refresh on some of these steps. And then we'll talk about the parameters and what we were asking for in the RFP. And at that point, we'll hand it over to Caitlin with Energy Strategies. Some of you guys know Caitlin. She helped us earlier in our process when we were a power supply committee. And so some of you will recognize Caitlin. Others will be meeting her for the first time today. And in the end, as Jessica mentioned, we'll be providing that recommendation. And then we'll have, I'm sure, a robust discussion afterwards. But our overall objective today is, of these 3 providers, we're going to narrow it down to 1 that we can enter into negotiations with. We are not signing a PPA today. I think that's a very important thing. You are not approving that. What you're approving is for us to enter into negotiations with this particular entity to get to that PPA. So we'll be working through all the details, term sheets, those kind of things. They'll be helping us support us from trying to come up with the transmission answers that we're looking for as well. So,
and Dan, before you move on, just to also clarify for the board, even in the negotiation component, we're not even getting to a point where we'd develop a purchase power agreement. So right. Just to make folks clear is that we're just seeking approval to continue negotiations with one provider. And so we will be coming back to the board with the full package of both the final buy down payment methodology and then this component. And then that's the point where folks, where we will come back to you and ask for approval if this is the option that the board wants to go in. So I just want to make everybody clear. There's no one's making any contracts. We're not asking for any final decision on the actual full partial buyout option. We are just asking to continue on these final pieces of the puzzle so we can bring a big package back to the board, probably November, December, for if this is the pathway that LPEA board wants to go on. So I just want to make that clear.
Very good. All right, continuing on. So we will reveal a recommendation to you right now, and so you can keep your eye on this particular supplier, but we are going to be recommending supplier number 2 for this enter into these negotiations, as Jessica mentioned, for our max power supply. So you can keep an eye on that one as we go through the presentation. So for some background information here on how we got to where we are. So believe it or not, it's been more than 2 years since we've started this whole process. This started with the contract committee up at Tri-State, and that's when things really got serious on looking for an alternate methodology for us to be able to meet our needs and desires to have more flexible and less expensive power supply. And that's when it started, was at the contract committee, going through that. And from that committee, Tri-State did approve and launch a partial requirements option. And then in May of 21, that's when we applied and we were awarded 71 megawatts of a max allocation. And I'll go through what max means here in just a little bit and describe that a little better. It's basically a block of power. Then by June, we'd sent out our RFPs back in May. And then in June, we had received 9 proposals back. And then in August, we had it, some in-person interviews and narrowed it down to the 3 power supply finalists. And then in August, we had some good negotiations and discussions working towards a settlement on a buy down payment. Okay. Now, some of you guys have seen this before, but as a refresher or good explanation for those that haven't, this is what the max power supply. Now, max stands for Member Auxiliary Supply, and we came up with a max acronym there. And what that does is basically splits our power supply into 2 different providers. And what we're looking for is the RFP is providing what is shown in this blue block. It is a flat, steady 71 megawatts of power every hour of the day. It's going to be comprised of wind, solar, local market purchases, and firm purchasing to make sure it stays at 71 megawatts. Now, what's shown here is actually our August load profile. So this is real data. The black line shows what La Plata Electric needs to serve its load through the month of August. So you can see in this example here for August, a 71 megawatt block covers an awful lot of the power supply we need to provide to our membership. Even though on average throughout the year, this max supply is about 2/3 of our power needed to serve our members. In August, it was probably a little more than that. And then in the green section, that shows what Tri-State would be supplying to us. They follow the load and they have the risk associated with that. And what I mean by the risk associated with that is if we lose an industrial customer or there's load loss or anything along those lines, that comes out of the top part, out of Tri-State's green part. So they're responsible for that portion of it there. So each month will be a little different. In the wintertime when our loads are higher, The green portion might be a little bit more. During the shoulder months, like we're coming into right now, the majority of our power will be definitely coming from this partial supply in the blue. I'm going to cover what the parameters were that we were looking for when we sent out our RFP. Now, we did share our RFP with you, so you probably are fairly familiar with these parameters that were in it. But to just cover that again, we're looking for a 71 megawatt block of firm power. It's around the clock, 24/7. We're also looking for price certainty, which is a big difference from what we've ever had in the past. We never know what our rate's going to be from year to year. But with these kind of contracts, we're saying, hey, for the entire term of the agreement, we want you to be able to provide price certainty for that and know what the price is every year. And it must be at or below, it must absolutely meet or be below LPEA's greenhouse gas strategic goal. We need reliable power. And also the key component, it has to be delivered to La Plata Electric at acceptable delivery points. And in talking with Tri-State, we were able to inform our power suppliers during the RFP what those points looked like. Of course, the company has to be financially sound, so we're asking for all their financial information to ascertain that. And they have to, another thing we added is they have to show commitment to local community, either in the form of grants, hiring local talent to install some local facilities, let them provide some information on that. And we're looking for multiple pricing options. We'd ask for, give us your best price. Give us your price that involved X amount of renewables associated with it. Give us a price with lots of flexibility. Give us a price that's just fixed throughout the term, or possibly with an escalator in it. So we wanted to see some different pricing options from them. And we wanted to know their ability to include the buy down payment financing in the package that they provided. So we could evaluate that, whether we wanted that on balance sheet or off balance sheet, which Carl will be speaking to a little later in the presentation today. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes the background of what we had for today. And the next steps would be to enter into executive session and have Caitlin review the RFPs there.
Hey, Dan, one thing that I think we should do though is take questions on these slides. Perfect. Since they are in public session, and then make sure everyone understands the background and context and history before we move on. And it looks like you have Sue McWilliams first.
Okay. Thanks, Jessica. One quick question for you, Dan. On the firm pricing, you mentioned that it's firm on an annual basis. So will we be renegotiating each year for that firm price?
No, we know the pricing. They've provided pricing for every year of the term of their agreement. So some would say, hey, it's going to be X amount flat for the entire term of the contract. Others would say, hey, it's going to be starting at this with an escalator. So we know every year for the term of the contract what the price is going to be.
And is the term of the contract the same throughout all of the RFPs? And if so, what was that term?
Dan, you got muted. Okay. Okay, there's the parameters there again. So you'd asked about the term of the contract. We had asked for a couple of different terms. We had a minimum of 10 years. And so we evaluated everything from 10 to 25 or so, and they gave some different options. And then we looked at that from a financial perspective to see which would fit us the best financially. And that's the one we focused in on to present today.
Okay, Tim was next.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm curious about the commitment to local community, and I would like maybe for our public to also understand a little bit more about what that means. Does that include obtaining local power?
Yeah, Tim, we do have a lot of these covered in the future slides, but like you said, you sort of wanted the public to hear about some of these. So I'll say most of that had to do with educational grants, the ability to use local employment, and also tax base. Those are the ones that we're really focused on. When you talk about putting local facilities in and actually having the power being local, that was what we sort of categorized in the flexibility options there. So we were looking at that as well.
Flexibility.
The ability to, for us to put in whatever power supply opportunities came to us. The ability to install local power.
So, okay, it's not on the parameters here. So again, I'm thinking of people who might watch this later and now. And so I guess probably the question then is really like, okay, so will we be able to have our, out of this, this supplier or this option, this max option, do we have the opportunity to say, get 10 megawatts of power locally?
Yes, and so there's a lot of nuances to that will be covered in here, but that was definitely part of the criteria we were looking at.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, Dan Kohler had his hand up next.
Hey, Kohler.
Yeah, Dan, you mentioned that with that graphic that you showed with the blue box, that it turns out that we're probably, with this option, that would provide 2/3 of the power. But when I look at policy 124, the tri-state board policy, it does state in there that you have to have at least 50% of the electric requirements served by tri-state. So I have a little disconnect there. Could you explain that for me, please?
Yes, great question, Kohler. All of tri-state's policies pertain to capacity. And so La Plata Electric, on average, when you average up our peak capacity every month, we're at 142 megawatts. So half of that is 71. And so that's what we could apply for. When you look at it from an energy perspective, it's more than 50% though. So all of Tri-State's policies are around the capacity side of it, which we do, which is being met here. And Tri-State is actually the one that provides the limit of 71 megawatts as the maximum amount.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dan, and then Joe had his hand up.
All right, Joe.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So I just, Dan, I wasn't clear. So are we still going to decide or is it 10 years that we're looking at now?
I'm sorry, I asked you garbled just a little bit there. Could you ask that again, please?
So is the term 10 years or are there a variety of options we're going to be looking at today?
The ones we are looking at today are primarily focused on a 20-year term.
20-year, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Dan, Rachel has her hand up too.
Rachel?
Thanks. Yeah, just I guess to help the viewing public and my own non-business mind, why just pick one member or provider to continue negotiations with from here? Why not kind of keep moving forward with all?
Rachel, we have sort of been down that part of the road already. We've had over the month of August some good interviews, and we have been negotiating with all three. And now we need to fine tune it and get down to the one that we actually want to move forward to and start in on those next steps. We have to start getting to specific terms and get into the details now with this one.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dan, Kirsten has her hand up.
Okay, Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. That was an interesting question. It makes me think about, would we want to consider having two alternate providers? So actually having three. So we would have Tri-State, we would have vendor A and vendor B. Would we consider that, or is everybody really tuned for the 71?
Kirsten, so to speak, we're always going to have alternate providers. We're never going to tell somebody, hey, this is the end of negotiations, you're gone forever. If we run into a dead end with the one we're trying to focus on, we always have the ability to go back and start negotiations with the others.
I'm asking a different question than you're answering, Dan. So my question is, would it be favorable for LPEA to have 3 power providers, one being Tri-State, one being vendor A for 20 years, and one being vendor B for 10 years, so that we have some, or something like that. So then we have some rolling on our expiration of our contracts. We have, if 2 is better than 1, is 3 better than 2?
You know what? I want to have Caitlin address some of those types of questions when we get into the executive session there on what best practices might be when you're looking for power supply options there.
Okay.
Well, and Kirsten, let me answer that, because that's a good question, but we're going to get into that into detail in executive session, because what you're going to see is that as we all know, when you build bigger facilities, it's a cheaper cost. So you really need to just pick one vendor for that large amount, because it's the economies of scale. But to your point, we've wanted to build in some flexibility into the contract so that you eventually would have 3, 4 different power providers. So we'll go into the details of that during executive session, but you'll see where we can carve out portions of the 71 and even have a third-party provider help us build local solar.
Okay, for the local. Okay, super.
Yep.
So and I'm sorry, I'm kind of late in it because it's kind of a strategic question, but until Rachel, you asked that question, it had not hit my brain. So thank you for asking that.
Yep, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? And we'll move to executive session. All right, John, I think you need to, Graham, right?
Yep. We need to get a motion. We need to get a motion, a second, and a 2/3 vote to go to executive session.
Motion
to the first to Tim, the second to.
I got it. Second.
There we go, Rachel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Any abstained? Okay, we'll see you on the other side.
Does anybody not have the link for executive session? Okay, we'll see you over there.
Okay.
So we've returned from executive session. We have no actions or resolutions that have come out of the executive session. But I did want to take a moment before we adjourn the public meeting to say, first and foremost, thank you so much to the staff. You guys have done an amazing job of taking on a very complicated and involved process and stewarding it through a very long period of time with lots of hurdles and lots of obstacles to come to continue to make great progress in what we hope is going to be a very exciting, very, very positive outcome for our entire community. And we really look forward to seeing you guys continue to make the great progress that you're making and bring this process to a close in the coming weeks and months. So thank you so much for all of your work. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to adjourn the meeting. No, do I need?
I think you can just adjourn it if the.
I love that. I just don't have the hammer. I mean, I like that hammer, the gavel.
I have that. Gotta get that gavel going, man.
Gosh darn it. Okay, well then, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for all your hard work.
Y'all Wednesday.
Yep. See y'all Wednesday.